Welcome, members and all regulars and all guests who we haven't met before in this Zendo. Very nice to have you here tonight. In a week of great difficulties in this country, in the world, in this country. And I just wanted to start with just a moment of silence to express the concern about the growing permission for violence in this country. With the killings that are escalating here and also around the world, but also very much in this country, our practice becomes even more urgent. Though as a Sangha we don't take direct action, we do address the source of all actions in a way that we hope will be taken up by more members of this species of ours over time. Through sustained investigation and vow, through our thoughts, our impulses, our shadow selves, we come to know aspects of ourselves that we didn't notice before and don't necessarily want to own up to. It's important that we know our shadow selves. And one of the pointers to that is that which we revile in others. We turn that around to say, okay, in what way is that energy in me? It's really essential that we all do that. So it helps us wake up to how we narrate the world, how we separate the world into them and me, into good and bad, a world that is incredibly complex. And ourselves are tremendously complex. And this practice, we come to know the complexity in all of its subtleties. We wake up to how we narrate the world and how we narrow the world. And how we respond to these narratives in our own activities and choices. We all have the capacity to extract nectar from the poison flower. This is a phrase that Jogan, dear friend, Dharma teacher, Jogan Salzberg, uses, extracting nectar from the poison flower. This is a phrase which comes from Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, to talk about the lore of the things of the world that are offered, the things that are offered by samsara, the world that is conditioned and narrowed around concerns for fame and wealth and power and safety. All of these are a poison flower. Things that are conditioned are poison flowers as long as we don't recognize that, their nature. They can bring death and destruction in pursuit of them as long as we don't recognize their nature. All conditioned things. Everything that we see around us is conditioned. Every thought that we have is conditioned. Every impulse is conditioned. So the nectar that can be extracted is an image that expresses the possibility of being able to discern and discover and learn how to transform this poison into freedom, into blessing. Everything that hangs us up all of our hindrances, all of our mistaken ideas and our, crusty habitual responses, reactions, reactivity can all be recognized and transformed. This is the blessing of the Dharma. This is what we're doing. Transformed into kindness, into patience, generosity, equanimity, and also satisfaction. There's nothing more satisfying than being thoroughly present in this moment. And when I heard about this shooting, this most recent shooting, I thought this poor human being who was acting out of a hell realm, was caught in a hell realm, a nightmare of being a shooter. It's profound. And it brings the nightmare into all of our lives and keeps it going. So what we begin to really have much more access to through our practice transforms this, extracts nectar from the poison flower. The Dharma Center, this Dharma Center, all Dharma Centers, has no function other than to support this vow to be awake and to continue to learn and open and recognize and see into whatever is coming about. It's ongoing. To extract the nectar from the poison flower. This Dharma Center has no function other than to support us, each of us, to embody and serve up benefit from this poison nectar. Benefit for all beings. And all of us here has to bring that about. That's all of our responsibility. Dharma practice is really about responsibility, not onerous, not burdensome, liberating responsibility. And the benefit that we bring depends on the thoroughness with which we approach our training here. And what we take from it as we leave the center into every setting of our life. We practice thoroughness here, meaning we pay attention to every aspect of what happens here. The physical space and how we behave in it. It's all Zen training. And I'm using the word tonight, training, because generally we pretty much focus on Zen practice. And of course we're all practicing all the time. We're like, concert pianists. You have to practice every day. Can't forget practice if you're going to play a beautiful melody. So we have the habit of calling this practice, but let's call this here training, Zen training, which is the way that it's generally referred to in the Zen world, Zen training. Practice is important, it's consistent, and it is practice, but this is more than practice in the attitude that we bring to it. What is the attitude of training? Training means it's more than just a casual, I'll pick it up when I feel like it. Training means every aspect of my life refers, I have concern for how it's going to affect my practice. So coming here in the beginning, without any background in Zen, often we get kind of worried how everything is so set out, so patterned. How we enter, when we enter, how we approach our seat, how we bow to each other in certain circumstances and not in others. This is how we train at the Zen Center. And I like to call this aspect of life together in the Zendo choreography, and many of you have heard me say that. It's choreography. It's designed to help all of us align in a way that's going to really support our ability to relax and open up and be vulnerable, actually. The kind of vulnerability that comes about when we sit silently with ourselves. We don't do things in a certain way because we want to be uptight or because the path is one of uptightness. It's actually the path of realness. I remember years ago at a retreat, the person who was the senior student to my teacher, Joanne Rick Roshi at the time, I thought, well, how can she be the senior student? Because she's so real. She was so relaxed. Now I understand what that was about. This method of training in mindfulness in this setting leads to greater awareness of interdependence into the collective. So we train at the Zen Center always aware of how each person is affected by what we do and how we conduct ourselves. Usually we as individuals, as egos, we want to please, we want to get along, we want to do right, be good and do right. That was a phrase my father used all the time, be good, do right. So when we enter new environments, we always enter ego forward, me forward, and with a lot of self-consciousness usually. Self-consciousness. All of us do this, and it's adaptive. We're animals. We need to keep our eyes open when we go into a group to see what's going on and to get along. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is the ego that gets tweaked here by all the patterns and the rules that we encounter. So whenever you get annoyed and impatient or skeptical, there are two aspects to that. One is to recognize, okay, this is why I'm here, is to really disengage from this narrowly defined, tightly held on to self and be able to relax no matter where I am and be present with whatever's going on in a way that's useful. And then, of course, when we have reactions in the Zen Center, we can pay attention to them and offer them in the places that we have. We have a lot of group work that goes on here, and usually members bring all kinds of complaints and concerns to those, and we often are regulated and alter how we're going to approach something because of that. There's a lot of wisdom, but not to hold it as though it's an absolute. So when we get to know the patterns and they become second nature, we're liberated from always having to refer to our own preferences and our own opinions as our guide. Not because there's anything wrong with having preferences. We all have preferences. But because this is a place where we can go beyond them and decenter from our ego habits. It's a big relief to discover this possibility, this capacity that we each have for that. Here in Zen practice, we can realize a fresh way of being, dropping the self that has to constantly claim and maintain territory, protect territory, ego self. We call this I, me, and what I have is mine. Here we train in the larger truth of this human life that's also always going on, the interdependent truth. And training in the way that we do, we can come to experience this really clearly. When we are relieved of self-clinging, we get freed up in a way that no amount of successful self-clinging can bring us. We all want to be successful, but no matter how much success we attain in the world, it just does not relieve the basic anxiety, existential anxiety. Doesn't bring the kind of ease. So what the small self can gain, can accomplish, can also lose and fail. One of my favorite quotes from Dogen Zenji is, "My life has been one continuous mistake." And you can hear that as, oh, if he thinks this is a mistake, then what am I doing, right? But really, he wasn't expressing regret there. He's just reminding us that he, even a very awake human being, makes mistakes. This is the reality of the human condition. Dogen was ordinary, just like you and me, just an ordinary human being who wanted to look deeply, just like we do, who wanted to be wise, just like we do, to see things as they really are. So when we are spared our constant self-reference, we can relax into our life and be real. We don't have to protect any kind of image. We can make mistakes. But we always come from the center of this moment just as it is. This is the wholeness of our life, and along with ignorance of the nature of our own minds and the character of our mental narratives, comes, without doing this work, comes a lot of anxiety and defensiveness, and sorrow and aggression and hostility and exploitation. All of it protects the pitiful little ego, which is what Chosen calls this. Oh, our pitiful little ego. Not in a disdaining way, but in a really compassionate way. It is kind of pitiful what we get caught up in, and what we think we have to defend, and what we think we are not, what we think we're missing. There's no escaping our foibles and our limitations. You know that that terrific title for the Pema Chodron book, The Wisdom of No Escape. It's true. There is no escape from being a human being and everything it brings along. There's no escape, especially when we're bound to the frame of reference that is limited to the ego self. The me, the mini-me. So where spaciousness is found is what we're training in here. Opening to not knowing, to possibilities, to connection, continuous learning, always investigating, practicing patience with ourselves and each other. We train in these ways here. So when Gene agreed to turn from the limits of his personal practice to accepting the responsibility of being a Shuso, he embodied what we are all doing here. We're all doing that turning, agreeing to the bother that comes with responsibility. It's an incredibly bothersome situation when you take on responsibility for your own life, and also for anything that your life may shed and affect other people with, if you're not paying attention, right? To be real and to lead, to make mistakes and to guide, and to learn from all of you. This is the This is the role of Shuso. This is actually all of our role. A lot of responsibility goes with it. The responsibility to be real as we practice embodying the Bodhisattva way. So we begin with our own personal practice, which is good, my practice. That's the important first step. Nothing happens without that step. And then we practice for the Sangha. That broadens our field of practice into all of our responsibilities and hindrances. When we're practicing for the Sangha, we're practicing for the Sangha at the Zen Center, but also the Sangha of all beings. Anyone who receives the 16 precepts and receives Jukai and a Dharma name, and sows a Rakusu and takes that on, joins in the vow to awaken along with everyone and to help the Sangha of all beings. But then we also keep going. So maybe it was Kyogen Carlson who said, first we practice for ourselves, then we practice for the Sangha, and then we practice for the Dharma. And I think that's a beautiful simple way of saying what the course of practice really is, what it encompasses. When we're practicing for the Dharma, we are appreciating the refuge that it offers in this garden of poison flowers. It's so remarkable to think about what is the refuge that we all find in this practice, even long before we have any understanding or we could say anything about it. You know, you may, like many of us, when you first practice, I didn't tell anybody I was practicing because I had no idea what to say about it. It was unmistakably good, but I did not know what to say about it. But the refuge is immediately available, if only in appreciating the silence and being able to sit with other people in the intimacy of silence. We don't have to entertain. This is where the Buddha manifests most vividly and provides refuge. Practicing for the Dharma is a way to embody our appreciation for this subtle and mysterious path. And keep it alive for future generations. So that's one thing that this center is about, is keeping the Dharma alive for who comes next. For learning how to be real and just use this life well and appreciate what each of us has to uniquely offer from our own human journey, our own twisted karma. Sangha Jewel Center needs all of us to pitch in. And I just wanted to say a little bit about this more specifically, because after a period of getting used to the dance steps here, we each become more finely attuned to how each action and each routine and each chant, each ritual is the way that we take on the complete path. And that's generalizable to our life from here. So for instance, Shuso has a view of all the goings on in the organization, as well as a minute view of moment by moment practice unfolding in the Zendo. He or she or they, as the case may be, is experienced in the ways of training. This takes a long time, and is willing to have his mistakes seen by all of us, and ego tweaked, and use that to clarify ego territorial guarding. It's one reason why shame is such a big deal in Zen, because we really confront when we really are getting down to the deep ego, that's when shame comes up, when it's seen and pointed out and tweaked. And that's not done to revile or to denigrate. It's a kindness. Hopefully this environment is kind enough so that that's clear. Shuso models the way for all of us to use this setting for our liberation from all that has kept us bound up, to relax into the choreography and tend to whatever needs tending. The Shuso takes care of it. The rest of us don't have to take care of it unless we are asked to do so, or we have a specific training role. The rest of us can just relax into the practice. So as any of you who have been in leadership roles knows, they require you to tune into your own mental chatter and self-involved habits, because you're going to notice them. So we have a number of training positions. The next one of equal or perhaps even more importance is head cook, which is called Tenzo, and that's going to be, this year that's going to be filled by Ellen, and who is graciously stepping up. Even though she's fairly new to practice, she is not new to practice. And so this role will help you discover that. And assisting her will be Gene. And the Tenzo pays attention to what we need for nourishment and hydration during all of the variety of things that we offer here for practice. The teas, the zazenkais, retreats, workshops, open houses. We're going to have one this summer. It's a really big job and a big opportunity to practice patience and discernment and wasting nothing and leaving no traces. So that's the Tenzo role. And actually on Tuesday nights, everybody who attends that Dharma discussion will be going into that in great detail. Then there are the housekeeping folks, led by Terry and a number of other folks. And you don't even notice what they do. But they keep this environment clean and healthy. And a number of you will be asked to pitch in there. The board members who are even legally on the line for the organization and hold financial and visioning and interpersonal affairs responsibilities. And we're always interested in encouraging people to consider going onto the board. All of these roles are an opportunity to look even more deeply into the Dharma teachings, because it always comes up. All of our meetings, we are always clarifying points of Dharma. And then there's the program committee, which figures out what the offerings we're going to be having. And that too has a lot of implications for our practice. The library, the garden crew, the building manager, very responsible. And we all really are blessed by their labors. It's all done as practice, which means that no task is too meager. No task requires anything less than wholehearted attention. This is called the wholehearted way, for the sake of the Dharma. At any moment, whatever you're doing, that's your whole life. Any moment. This is our whole life right here. And when we are here, there's nothing else that we need to pay attention to. And isn't that a refuge? You come here to sit, and there's nothing you have to pay attention to. All you need to do is sit and breathe, listen, notice. This is a body practice. And we are trained in this way when we're trained in this way, it carries into how we approach everything in our life. We may discover that we've been unnecessarily complicating and confounding ourselves. And when we give undivided attention to anything, we come to cherish, no matter what the conditions are, that there is so much life right here in this very moment. So may we all pitch in with our whole heart to practice together.